My name is Stan Jones. I'm president of Complete College America. I think you all know we work with states. We have an alliance of states, and our only purpose is having more students complete college. Hence the name Complete College America. It took us about 3 months to figure out that name, but we're very pleased you're here. You represent 25 states, the District of Columbia, and the state of Chicago. So we're very pleased to have. So I'm going to do a very brief overview because you've got just some wonderful experts here today. They're going to talk to you and then also have breakout sessions with you. As we start, we call, as I think probably some of you know, we have what we call game changers. And there are not many, there are 5. I say to people, you know, there's 101 things you can do about college completion, but we're not writing that book. The research we've done, the research that other people have done, have led us to the conclusion that there are about 5 key things that you can do that can move the needle substantially, and that's why they're called game changers. And there's evidence, and you'll hear some of the evidence today, that these are highly effective strategies. And they work, and they can be replicated across your state or city. One of the key strategies is guided pathways to success, or GPS. It may sound more complicated than it is, and we're going to try to simplify it and demystify it as we have our conversation. The basic problem is that a lot of these students, most of these students, have no clear path to graduation. They graduate not on time. At community colleges across the country, the on-time graduation rate for full-time students is 5%. Full-time students at community colleges across the country take not 2 years, not 3 years, but 4 years to graduate, full-time students. Excess credits, most community college students graduate with 80 credits, not 60. Most four-year colleges graduate those students with 135, 136 credits, not 120. A lot of it has to do, not all of it's within our ability to influence, but a lot of it has to do with there's no clear path for these students. You know this, the most important thing that struck me was this very last point. 45% of students haven't seen a counselor by the 3rd week of classes. We have this notion that there's this thoughtful process that advisors and faculty and students go through. We know that that's not the case. You ask your friend, what are you taking? You read a 1-sentence course title. You try to find a class that's not on Friday afternoon, and that's how you make your pick. Many of you that have seen this slide will say, well, that's not true. Actually, it's 1,000 to 1 at my campus. We are just so terribly under-resourced, and we're not going to be able to fix this problem this way. This is one of the most interesting things I think we've come up against, is the fact that as Americans we love choice, but the evidence is overwhelming that we drown with too much choice. And there are an endless number of psychology books out there on this issue. The Art of Choosing, The Paradox of Choice, Rational, Irrational Choice, all great books, all make the same point, is that as Americans we need to choose. But we are overwhelmed with too many choices, and especially with uninformed choice. One of the better books you might want to read that applies directly, Kindle, about $10, Nudge, speaks directly to this point. It really advocates putting people on default pathways. Now, Nudge is not actually written about higher education. It's written about a whole scope of practices that people entertain. But the basic idea is that most people accept, welcome, and prefer a default pathway or default direction. One of the best indications of this is in most states, the organ donor program. You go into your license branch and you wait a long time, but eventually you can opt in to be in the organ donor program. Across this country, about 20-25% of us do that. There are about a half a dozen countries in Europe that it's the reverse. You are in unless you opt out. 90% participation rate. It's true over and over again. When people look at 401ks, the more choices they have, the less likely they are to make choices at all, and the less likely they are to make good choices. And I don't want to underemphasize this. This is probably the most important part of what you need to consider is the default. We have had academic maps for decades. When I was a student, somebody handed me a suggested map, but for most students, it's simply a suggestion or a notion or a thought. But the default really makes the difference. And these plans will fall apart unless the default. So what do these programs need to look like? Now, many of you have nursing programs, and you're aware how highly prescriptive, how highly sequenced these programs are. In many cases, they're block scheduled. You don't get to say, well, I'm a little squeamish about blood. Could I trade that class for another one? Or take that in a different semester? The nurses wouldn't have any part of that. So you take their courses on their timetable, prescribed, sequenced. And I know nursing's hard to get into, so we do start with a higher academic group. But historically, they've had a very high graduation rate. Engineering, not quite as prescriptive and sequenced, but very so. A long time ago, I was an engineering student at Purdue University, and when I arrived, I was told you were taking chemistry, you're taking physics, you're taking calculus, you're taking English, and you get one elective from liberal arts. And the second semester was the same. Once we chose and were selected to a discipline, chemical, mechanical, industrial, again, it was a sequenced march to graduation. Engineers have high graduation rates. Many honors programs, same thing, very structured. Lieutenant Governor of Illinois stopped me and she said, well, Stan, I went to law school, first year, we didn't have choices. They said, you were taking this as law students. Our former governor of Tennessee, Phil Bredesen, went to Harvard. He said, Stan, this is how we took our freshman year. So this works. By contrast, I think it's, let's see if I get my family relations right. This is a stepdaughter's fiance who's 29, bright kid, didn't have any money or family support when he graduated from high school. 29, went back. So I say, you got to go see your counselor. Well, of course, that ship's passing in the night, emails back and forth. Finishes the first semester, he has B average, finishes 4 or 5 classes, that's great. Starts the second semester. He wants to start at the community college, transfer to the 4-year college. I said, Jeff, by the way, what are you taking? He said, well, I'm taking political science, I'm taking philosophy, I'm taking psychology. And I said, wait. I know that you want to be construction management technology at the 4-year college. And I can't imagine you've got that many liberal arts courses in your program, especially after the ones you took the first semester. He says, okay. I said, well, so you go back down and you talk to them about this. So he goes back down and he says, do these courses transfer to this 4-year college? And the counselor said, well, yes, they do. So he comes back and he says, well, Stan, they say they transfer. I said, no. They transfer, but they don't transfer to your program. So we got the program from the 4-year college that said very specifically, at this 2-year college, this is what you need to take. Of course, by that time, he hadn't taken his math, so he couldn't take physics, he couldn't take strength of materials, he hadn't taken his drafting class, so he was backed up there. So this student is already at least a semester behind, even though he thought he was doing the right things, he's a good student and asking the right questions. And of course, the worst case, which I'm sure you've all come across, is I can't get a course I need, but I still need 12 hours to get financial aid. So I'm throwing away a course, but I got to do it. And I'm sure you've heard those stories too. So that's why this is so terribly important. This looks more complicated again than it is. But you've got experts all day that are going to talk to you about these key things. But I'd focus on the default. We need to help students think about their choices that they make. If they can't make a major choice or a program choice, then they go into a meta major, MAPS you're very familiar with. Critical path courses I'll talk about in a minute. And finally, advising is so terribly important. Again, we don't want students to discover the right path, help them choose that major, and then that is their default schedule, that is their path. These students, many of them are 18 and 19. The faculty are the best people to chart that path to graduation, not a 19-year-old. If a student knows what their major is, some students said from the fifth grade on, I wanted to be an elementary school teacher, that's great. But a lot of students don't know. And so rather than making a choice of 200 majors, meta majors, clusters, make a lot of sense. One of the most important decisions that they have to make is math. It separates these programs very directly. If you're going to be in STEM, you have got to be in the calculus pathway the very first semester. Hardly anybody transfers into STEM after the first year. Conversely, the only purpose of college algebra is to prepare you for calculus. So if you're not going to have calculus in your program, you shouldn't be in college algebra. You should be in quantitative literacy or statistics. Again, the big thing here is this mind shift of not having students pick courses, having them pick majors and programs. And then the faculty lay out the best design. Because right now, for many students, this is a buffet line. And it really shouldn't be that way. It should be a holistic program. And you end up with a sequential, prescriptive schedule of classes for the meta major and the major. You've seen maps before. This is just a typical map. Nothing too exciting about it, but it's very term by term. This is important. Critical path courses. We don't mean every course, but there are courses, like I just explained. If you don't take this math course, not only means you can't take the next math course, it may mean you can't take this computer science course, or you can't take this physics course, or you can't take the strength and material course. So these are critical path courses that have to be taken in the semester, or they will, in the right semester, or they will throw you off, even if you're a good student. And the college has to work. We're not asking colleges to guarantee everything on the schedule, but these critical math courses, you've got to offer them so students can take them. Here at Sinclair, you'll hear from them earlier. They default, once you picked your plan, you get defaulted into your plan at registration. Other colleges are doing this as well. Essentially, is they are pre-registering you on your map. They're not, I've had a president say to me, Stan, we give them, take these 5 courses, by the time they leave the advisor's office and get to the registration office, it's changed. So colleges are moving to directly registering these students on their maps. Intrusive advising, very important. Essentially, it says if you're not taking these critical path courses, you're off schedule. You've got to see your advisor. If you fall 2 courses behind, you've got to see your advisor, either to catch up or to say, Stan, are you in the right program? Should we talk about this? And finally, the evidence is overwhelming. If they have a 2.0 or less, then 50% of these students are going to drop out unless there's an intervention. Overwhelming. Success, Georgia State focuses mostly on intrusive advising. The Ed Trust has done a study. They have, as you can see, the most important part here, I would say, is their Pell students, African American students, and Hispanic students graduate about the same rate as their white students. They virtually wiped out the equity gap. And I think they graduate more African Americans in this country than any other university. Very impressive. Florida State, which was one of the early pioneers, dramatic increase in graduation rates, and again, closing that achievement gap, eliminating that achievement gap. These are 2 of the best in the country. Now, for those that have very low graduation rates, I would highly recommend, this is really a game changer by itself, structured schedules. And that's as simple as blocking classes. Georgia, and it doesn't, so you go, for example, to the CUNY system in New York City, the new college that they have there. They say, Stan, would you like to go in the morning or the afternoon? So I take my classes from 8:30 to 11:30 Monday through Friday, or 1:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. It's that simple. I know Georgia State has a Monday, I think they do 8:30 to 1:30 Monday through Wednesday. I think they have a Tuesday, Thursday block. I think there's probably a couple other blocks. It doesn't have to be every day. But most of these campuses, 95% of these students are commuters. Spreading their schedule over the whole week doesn't help them. They can come, take their classes in a block. Most of these students work, but they're working at McDonald's, they're working at this hotel, and it's so much simpler to walk into your employer and say, my classes are every morning, I'm free every afternoon or evening. Or I'm done with classes by Wednesday, I'm free Thursday, Friday, and all weekend. So blocking classes helps students that work. Over 70% of students that work, they work to go to school. It's not that they're working and on the side going to school. Block schedules, nothing complex about this. This is a morning and afternoon block. I think they also have put together an evening Saturday block. As well at Baltimore City Community College. I mentioned City University of New York. These are not just for technical programs. This is a liberal arts program. They have 75% of those students go on to the university to pursue four-year degrees. So block schedules are not just for technology programs, but they're for liberal arts programs as well. Results. New York City, 55% three-year graduation rate, compared to 25% in the city. So more than doubled their graduation rate. The Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology, now these are one-year programs, but they're one-year certificate programs that are offered by many community colleges. At many community colleges, you're going to get more like a 14% completion rate on these tech programs. These one-year certificates, they get a 75% completion rate, block scheduled. This is a recent Ivy Tech statewide, Indiana, restructuring all their technology programs. Their first cohort, 85% completion rate for their certificates, their one-year certificates. They used to have a 10% completion rate. Their faculty did not want to do this until they showed them the data. And they said, your students are not getting associate degrees, they're not even getting one-year certificates. Faculty care about students. You need to start the discussion with faculty about the data. People won't change how they think. Otherwise, it's a he said, she said. So you've got to get your program data out, you've got to get your retention data out, you've got to see what's happening to these students. And finally, you cannot forget, if you have 3 semesters of remediation before they start, we're already behind. So you have to embed remediation or do co-requisite. More full-time students in this country take 12 hours than 15. So more students start on the 5-year plan. So you need to think about getting 15 credit hours or 30 hours within a year. It could be a 12-12-6. But credit accumulation is the highest correlation to graduation of anything you could possibly do. It's credits earned. Retention means you came back. It doesn't mean you made progress. Credit earned is huge. Again, degree requirements, if you got 140, we had a music program at Fort Wayne, they had 145 required credits, more than the international known music program at IU Bloomington. And finally, you're going to hear some good people talk about technology. It can be simple or expensive. There's different models, but it can be done simply, and you need it to make this happen. So in closing, here it is, and this is what we're going to talk about today. We're thrilled you're here. This is really a game changer. We need you to think not only about, this is not a pilot program, but this is really the way students will go to school in the future. You may talk about phasing it in, but this does work. It's not a pilot program. Those of you that work with states, you need to think about scaling across campuses and across the whole state. Otherwise, you need to do that to get the numbers. So we say, we're kind of rethinking this. GPS is not a suggestion. It's not just a map. It's a direct route to graduation. It's guaranteed, prescriptive, and structured. So we're saying that's what GPS, guaranteed, prescribed, and structured. And you will hear today on how successful these people have been, and they've been in the trenches doing it, their faculty, their provosts, and then you'll have time to talk to them individually.